The train whistle pierced the autumn air as Virginia Williams clutched the handle of her trunk, her knuckles white with anxiety as she stepped onto the wooden platform of Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The journey from Boston had been long, leaving her body weary but her spirit determined. This was to be the beginning of her new life, a fresh start as the bride of Mr. Harold Jennings, a man she knew only through 6 months of correspondence, and a single daguerreotype showing a handsome, well-dressed gentleman with a trimmed beard and confident eyes. The station was bustling with activity as Virginia smoothed down her blue traveling dress, pinched her cheeks for color, and searched the faces for the man who had promised to make her his wife. After 25 years of spinsterhood in Boston, teaching children who would never be her own, she had answered his advertisement seeking a woman of good character and education to share in building a prosperous life in Wyoming Territory. Virginia spotted a man who matched the photograph, and her heart quickened. He was taller than she'd imagined, dressed in a fine suit that seemed at odds with the frontier setting. His eyes found hers, and something flashed across his face. Disappointment, perhaps? He approached hesitantly. "Miss Williams?" he asked, his voice tight. "Yes, Mr. Jennings. I'm pleased to finally make your acquaintance," she replied, extending her gloved hand. He took it briefly, his touch cool and withdrawn. "Indeed." His eyes swept over her from head to toe, lingering on the slight hunch of her left shoulder, a remnant of childhood illness that had never fully healed, and the spectacles perched upon her nose. "Your letters did not mention your physical condition," he said after an uncomfortable silence. Virginia's cheeks burned. "I did not think it relevant. It doesn't affect my ability to keep house, or—" "I apologize, Miss Williams," he interrupted, "but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I require a wife who can present a certain image. My business associates expect it." He cleared his throat. "And you're rather older than your photograph suggested." Virginia stood frozen, the world spinning around her. The photograph she had sent was recent, taken just before her departure. Perhaps it had been the lighting or the photographer's skill, but she had thought it a fair representation. "I see," she managed, though her throat constricted painfully. "I'll arrange for your return ticket to Boston." He reached into his pocket for his wallet. "I regret the confusion." "Please don't," she whispered, mortified at the stares from curious onlookers. "I've sold my home. There's nothing for me to return to." Harold Jennings frowned, uncomfortable with the scene she was creating. "That's unfortunate, but not my concern. I cannot marry a woman who—" he gestured vaguely at her entire person. "I understand," Virginia said, straightening her spine despite the humiliation burning through her. "Please, just go." He nodded once, placed a few dollars on top of her trunk, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. Virginia stood alone on the platform, her trunk beside her, as the other passengers dispersed. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. She would not break down here in front of strangers. The station agent approached, an older man with kind eyes. "Train to Denver leaves tomorrow morning, miss," he offered gently. "You're welcome to wait in the station overnight." Virginia nodded mutely, overwhelmed by the prospect of a future suddenly empty of promise. Where would she go? What would she do? The modest teacher's savings she had spent on her trousseau and travel would not sustain her for long. As the platform emptied and the afternoon shadows lengthened, Virginia sat on her trunk, contemplating her options. She could seek employment in Silver Creek, though the thought of remaining in the town where she had been so publicly rejected was unbearable. Perhaps in Denver, or further west. "Excuse me, miss. You've been sitting here a while. You waiting for someone?" Virginia looked up to find a tall, broad-shouldered man standing before her. He wore a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, denim trousers, and scuffed boots, the attire of a working man, not a businessman like Harold Jennings. His face was tanned from the sun, with laugh lines at the corners of blue eyes that regarded her with genuine concern. He removed his hat, revealing dark blonde hair that curled slightly at the ends. "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not anymore." He frowned, taking in her trunk and travel-worn appearance. "You're one of them mail-order brides, aren't you?" Virginia flushed, hating the pity she saw dawn in his expression. "I was. It seems I wasn't what the gentleman expected." The stranger's jaw tightened. Some men wouldn't know a treasure if it was handed to them on a silver platter. He gestured to the trunk she sat upon. "May I help you with that?" "Looks heavy for a lady to manage alone." "That's kind, but I've nowhere to take it," Virginia confessed. "I was planning to spend the night here at the station." The man's frown deepened. "Station gets mighty cold at night, and it ain't proper for a lady." He seemed to consider something for a moment. "Name's Daniel Irwin. I own a small cattle ranch about 5 miles outside town." "Virginia Williams," she replied automatically, then tensed. "Mr. Irwin, I appreciate your concern, but call me Daniel, and I ain't suggesting anything improper." He smiled, showing a small dimple in his left cheek. "My sister Sarah lives with me. She'd be glad of female company. You're welcome to stay with us until you figure your next steps." Virginia hesitated. She'd already trusted one stranger and been humiliated for it. Yet there was something straightforward about Daniel Irwin's gaze that made her want to believe in him. "Why would you help me?" she asked cautiously. Daniel shrugged. "My ma raised me to never leave someone in trouble when I could lend a hand." He glanced at the darkening sky. "Besides, looks like rain's coming, and I wouldn't leave a dog out in that, let alone a lady." Before Virginia could respond, the station agent called over. "Danny, good to see you in town. Made it just before closing." "Afternoon, Frank," Daniel called back with a friendly wave. "I'm here for that package from Kansas City." "Got it right here," Frank replied, disappearing into the station office and returning with a small parcel. "Last one of the day." Daniel took the package, then turned back to Virginia. "What do you say, Miss Williams? My wagon's just over yonder. Sarah will have supper ready by the time we get there." Virginia looked from the empty platform to the stranger offering help and made her decision. "Thank you, Mr. Irwin. I accept your kind offer just until I can arrange alternative accommodations." Daniel nodded, seeming pleased. He bent down and lifted her heavy trunk with surprising ease, hoisting it onto his shoulder. "This all you got?" "Yes," Virginia replied, gathering her small handbag and parasol. "Follow me, then." He led her to a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. After securing her trunk in the back, he offered his hand to help her onto the seat. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. As Daniel climbed up beside her and took the reins, Virginia heard Frank call out from the station door. "Taking her home, Danny." "That Harold Jennings is a fool," Daniel grinned at the station master. "His loss," he called back. Then he turned to Virginia with a wink. "Just got myself a wife, Frank. She's coming home with me." Virginia gasped, mortified at his jest, but Frank just laughed and waved as Daniel flicked the reins and the wagon pulled away from the station. "Mr. Irwin," she protested once they were on the road. "Why would you say such a thing?" Daniel's expression sobered. "Small towns run on gossip, Miss Williams. By morning, everyone would know you were left at the station. This way, folks will think Jennings backed out and I stepped in." He glanced at her. "Preserves your dignity, I reckon." Virginia was speechless. This stranger had thought to protect her reputation when her intended hadn't even bothered to spare her feelings. "Thank you," she said finally. "That was thoughtful." Daniel nodded, keeping his eyes on the road as they left the small town behind. My sister was a mail-order bride some years back. Her intended died of typhoid before she arrived. Knows how it feels to be stranded. The road turned rougher as they headed into the rolling prairie, golden with autumn grasses. In the distance, Virginia could see mountains rising purple against the sky. Despite her circumstances, she couldn't help but be struck by the wild beauty of Wyoming territory, so different from the crowded streets and neat gardens of Boston. "It's beautiful country," she remarked softly. Daniel smiled. "That it is, harsh sometimes but honest. The land doesn't pretend to be something it's not." He glanced at her. "Unlike some people." Virginia looked down at her hands folded in her lap. "Mr. Jennings had certain expectations, and you didn't meet them?" Daniel asked, his tone suggesting he found the idea ridiculous. "I'm not as young or robust as he'd hoped." Virginia touched her slightly hunched shoulder self-consciously. Daniel's hands tightened on the reins. "Man who judges a woman by such things ain't worth your tears, Miss Williams." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the wagon wheels crunching over the dirt road. Virginia found herself studying Daniel Irwin's profile, the straight nose, the firm jaw with just a hint of stubble, the way he squinted slightly against the setting sun. He was handsome in a rugged way, nothing like the polished appearance of Harold Jennings, yet there was something undeniably appealing about his natural confidence. "Tell me about your ranch," Virginia said, partly out of genuine interest and partly to distract herself from her precarious situation. Daniel's face lit up with obvious pride. "It ain't large, just 200 acres, but the land's good. Running water year-round from a creek that cuts through the property. Got about 60 head of cattle, mostly Herefords, 10 horses, including these two." He patted the rump of the nearest horse affectionately. "Some chickens, 2 milk cows, and a vegetable garden my sister tends." "It sounds lovely," Virginia said sincerely. "It's home," Daniel replied simply. "Built the cabin myself when I first came out here 8 years ago. Added on when Sarah joined me. It ain't fancy, but it's solid and warm." Virginia tried to imagine this self-assured man building a home with his own hands. In Boston, men of means hired others for such labor. "You must be very skilled." Daniel shrugged modestly. "Had to learn fast. Out here, if something breaks, you either fix it yourself or do without." As they crested a small hill, Virginia caught her first glimpse of the Irwin Ranch. A neat log cabin with a porch across the front sat nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. A barn and several smaller outbuildings were arranged in a horseshoe pattern around a central yard. Beyond, she could see fenced pastures where cattle grazed. "There she is," Daniel said, a note of pride in his voice. "Not much compared to Eastern standards, I expect." "It's wonderful," Virginia replied honestly. After the uncertainty of the day, the ranch looked like a haven of stability. As they approached, a woman emerged from the cabin, wiping her hands on an apron. She had the same coloring as Daniel, blonde hair and fair skin tanned by the sun, but her eyes were green rather than blue. She looked to be in her early 30s, with a welcoming smile that immediately put Virginia at ease. "Danny, you're back earlier than I expected," she called, then noticed Virginia. "And you've brought company." Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin. "Sarah, this is Miss Virginia Williams. She's had a bit of trouble and needs a place to stay for a short while." He jumped down and came around to help Virginia descend. "Miss Williams, my sister, Sarah Irwin." "Pleased to meet you," Virginia said, suddenly self-conscious about her travel-wrinkled dress and wind-blown hair. Sarah's warm smile never faltered. "Likewise, Miss Williams. Any friend of my brother's is welcome here." She glanced at Daniel, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Miss Williams was to marry Harold Jennings, Daniel explained, lifting Virginia's trunk from the wagon. He proved himself an idiot and lost his chance. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. I see. Well, his loss is our gain. Come inside, Miss Williams. You must be exhausted after your journey. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a cooking stove beside it. Handmade furniture, a dining table with benches, several chairs, and a small sofa were arranged to make the most of the space. Colorful rag rugs covered portions of the plank floor, and curtains made from flour sacks framed the windows. It's not much, Sarah said, echoing her brother's earlier sentiment, but it's home. It's lovely, Virginia assured her, meaning it. The cabin had a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. Sarah showed Virginia to a small bedroom off the main room. You can sleep here. It's not very big, but it's private. Where will you sleep? Virginia asked, concerned. I share the loft with Danny. There's a curtain between us, Sarah explained with a smile. We're used to it, Virginia protested. I couldn't possibly displace you from your room. Nonsense. The loft gets too hot in summer anyway. I've been meaning to move back up now that it's cooling off. Sarah patted her arm. Now you rest a bit while I finish supper. We can talk more over the meal. Left alone, Virginia sat on the edge of the narrow bed, emotions finally catching up to her. The tears she had held back all day threatened to spill over. What was she doing here in a stranger's home with no plan for her future? Harold Jennings' rejection stung, not because she had loved him. How could she love a man she'd never met? But because it confirmed her deepest fear, that she was unworthy of love, destined to be alone. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Williams, it was Daniel's voice. May I come in? Virginia hastily wiped her eyes. Yes, of course. Daniel entered, carrying a basin of steaming water. Thought you might want to freshen up before supper. He set it on the small table beside the bed. Sarah's put out some towels and soap. Thank you, Virginia said, touched by the thoughtfulness. Daniel lingered, seeming to want to say more. Miss Williams, I want you to know you can stay as long as you need. No rush to figure out your next steps. That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. It's no imposition, he interrupted gently. Truth is, Sarah could use the company. Gets lonely out here for her, especially with winter coming on. He hesitated. And if you're willing, we could use the help. Sarah does the cooking and gardening, but there's mending, egg gathering, butter churning, woman's work that piles up. We could pay you a fair wage. Virginia stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. You'd hire me, without knowing my capabilities? Daniel smiled. You seem like a capable woman to me. Anyone who'd travel across the country to marry a stranger has got courage and determination. Those are traits I admire. Before Virginia could respond, Sarah called from the other room. Supper's ready. Think about it, Daniel said, backing toward the door. No need to decide tonight. Supper was a simple but delicious affair: venison stew, cornbread, and preserved peaches. Virginia found herself relaxing in the easy company of the Irwin siblings, who asked about her journey but tactfully avoided mentioning Harold Jennings. So you were a teacher in Boston? Sarah asked as she poured coffee after the meal. Yes, for 7 years at a girls' academy, Virginia replied. I taught literature and composition primarily. Daniel leaned forward, interested. You must be well educated. My father believed in education for both his sons and daughters, Virginia explained. He was a professor at Harvard College. A professor's daughter, Sarah mused. What brought you all the way out here to marry a stranger? Virginia stared into her coffee cup. My parents died 3 years ago within months of each other. My brothers are both married with families of their own. I wanted a family of my own. At my age, prospects in Boston were limited. Daniel's expression was sympathetic. How old are you, if you don't mind my asking? I'll be 26 next month, Virginia admitted, waiting for the judgment she'd seen in Harold Jennings' eyes. Instead, Daniel chuckled. Why, you're practically a girl. Sarah here is 32 and I'm 30. Out here, folks marry when they find the right person, not by some arbitrary calendar. Virginia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Perhaps age truly mattered less on the frontier. As they cleared the table together, Sarah spoke quietly to Virginia. My brother is right about needing help, but that's not the only reason he offered. He's a good man with a soft spot for those in need. He seems very kind, Virginia agreed. Watching as Daniel went outside to check on the livestock before nightfall, Sarah nodded. The kindest. Been taking care of me since our parents died when I was 16, and he was just 14. Worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She smiled fondly. When I got that letter from my intended's neighbor saying he'd died, Danny came all the way to Kansas City to fetch me home. Said if Wyoming wasn't getting a brother-in-law, he was at least getting his sister back. Virginia's heart warmed at the story. You're fortunate to have each other. That we are, Sarah agreed. And now, perhaps, we're fortunate to have you too for however long you stay. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the strange night sounds of the prairie, Virginia made her decision. She would stay, at least through the winter. She would earn her keep and save what she could. By spring, she would have a plan for her future. The days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Virginia rose early each morning, helping Sarah prepare breakfast before the men Daniel and his ranch hand. A quiet Mexican man named Miguel came in from their morning chores. After breakfast, Virginia and Sarah worked together on household tasks. Virginia discovered she enjoyed the physical labor of churning butter and hanging laundry in the crisp autumn air. The simplicity of the work was soothing after years of intellectual pursuits. In the evenings, they gathered around the fire. Sometimes Daniel read aloud from one of the few books they owned, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Other evenings, Virginia told stories she remembered from her teaching days. Sarah often mended by the light of the fire, while Daniel carved small animals from bits of wood, a talent that surprised and delighted Virginia. You have an artist's hands, she told him one evening, examining a perfectly rendered rabbit he had just finished. Daniel looked embarrassed but pleased. Just a way to pass the time in winter. It's more than that, Virginia insisted. You see the essence of the creature, not just its form. He smiled at her, their eyes meeting for a long moment. Virginia felt something stir within her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling nearby. As October turned to November, Virginia noticed Daniel watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Sometimes their hands brushed as they passed tools or dishes, and she felt a jolt of awareness that both frightened and excited her. She had never experienced such feelings before, had never expected to. One crisp morning, Daniel asked if she would like to see more of the ranch. Thought you might enjoy a ride. You've been working hard and it's a fine day. Virginia hesitated. I've never ridden a horse. Daniel seemed surprised, then smiled. Never too late to learn. I'll saddle Daisy for you. She's gentle as a lamb. An hour later, Virginia found herself atop a placid mare, with Daniel riding beside her on his stallion. He had been patient in teaching her the basics, his hands strong and sure as he helped her into the saddle. Now they rode slowly across a meadow, the grass golden under the autumn sun. What do you think of Wyoming now that you've had a taste of it? Daniel asked as they paused to let the horses drink from a clear stream. Virginia looked around at the vast landscape, the distant mountains dusted with early snow. It's beautiful in a way that's hard to describe. In Boston, everything feels contained, managed. Here, there's a wildness that's both intimidating and freeing. Daniel nodded. That's what drew me here, the freedom of it, room to breathe, to build something that's truly mine. He looked at her intently. Do you miss Boston? Virginia considered the question. I miss certain things, libraries, concerts, the familiarity of it, but not as much as I expected to. She smiled shyly. Your home has been more welcoming than I could have imagined. It could be your home too, Daniel said quietly, then quickly added, for as long as you want, I mean. Virginia's heart skipped a beat, but before she could respond, a distant rumble caught their attention. Thunder? She asked, glancing at the clear sky. Daniel shook his head, suddenly alert. Riders, coming fast. He turned his horse, positioning himself slightly in front of Virginia. Stay close to me. 5 riders appeared over the rise, moving at a gallop toward them. Virginia's pulse quickened with apprehension, but Daniel seemed to relax as they drew nearer. It's all right, he assured her. I know them. That's Ben Foster and his boys from the neighboring ranch. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. The leader, a weathered man in his 50s, tipped his hat to Virginia. Sorry to startle you folks, we're tracking rustlers. Lost 6 head last night. Daniel frowned. Rustlers, in these parts? Ben nodded grimly. 3rd ranch hit this month. Sheriff thinks it's that Blackwell gang moved up from Colorado. He turned to Virginia. Pardon me, madam, don't mean to frighten you with such talk. This is Miss Virginia Williams, Daniel introduced her. She's staying with Sarah and me for a while. Ben's eyes showed recognition. Ah, heard about you in town. Sorry about Jennings. Man's a fool. He looked between her and Daniel with obvious speculation. Though maybe things worked out for the best. Virginia felt her cheeks warm under his knowing gaze. After the men exchanged information about the rustlers, Ben and his sons rode off, continuing their search. Daniel watched them go with a troubled expression. We should head back, he said. I want to check on the herd. As they rode, Virginia noticed Daniel scanning the horizon, his posture tense. Are you worried about the rustlers? She asked. A bit, he admitted. Can't afford to lose any cattle. This year's been tight already with the drought this summer. He glanced at her. Don't worry, though. The ranch house is safe. That evening, Daniel cleaned his rifle at the table while discussing the situation with Miguel. Virginia and Sarah exchanged worried glances as they prepared supper. Is it very dangerous? Virginia asked Sarah in a low voice. Cattle rustling can turn violent, Sarah replied honestly. But Danny and Miguel know how to handle themselves. She squeezed Virginia's hand. Try not to worry. These things usually blow over. But Virginia did worry, especially when Daniel announced he and Miguel would take turns keeping watch over the herd at night. The thought of him out alone in the darkness, possibly confronting armed criminals, filled her with dread. Be careful, she told him as he prepared to leave after supper on the first night. Daniel paused, seeming surprised by her concern. I will. He hesitated, then reached out to briefly touch her cheek. Don't you fret, I'll be back by morning. For a week, the vigilance continued. Virginia found herself listening for Daniel's return each morning, relief washing over her when she heard his footsteps on the porch. She began making sure hot coffee was ready when he came in. Cold and tired from the night watch one morning, he didn't return at the usual time. Sarah tried to hide her concern as the hours passed, but by mid-morning, both women were watching the road anxiously. I'm going to look for him, Sarah finally announced, reaching for her coat. I'm coming with you, Virginia insisted, already pulling on her boots. They had just stepped outside when they saw a horse approaching Daniel's stallion but without its rider. Sarah gasped, her face paling. "Something's happened," she whispered. Miguel, who had been repairing a fence nearby, rushed over. "I will find him," he said, catching the horse's reins. "You ladies stay here." "No," Virginia said firmly. "Sarah should stay in case he comes back another way, but I'm going with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Sarah started to protest, then saw the determination in Virginia's face. "She's right," she told Miguel. "Let her go." Minutes later, Virginia was riding double with Miguel, following the stallion's tracks back to where Daniel had been keeping watch over the herd. They found him in a small ravine, conscious but badly injured. "Danny!" Virginia cried, sliding from the horse and rushing to his side. His face was bruised and bloody, and he held his left arm at an awkward angle, but he managed a weak smile when he saw her. "Virginia, what are you doing out here?" "Looking for you, you foolish man," she scolded, tears welling in her eyes as she knelt beside him. "What happened?" "Rustlers," he grimaced. "3 of them. Tried to take some calves. I interrupted them. Got thrown from my horse during the scuffle." He winced as he tried to sit up. "Think my arm's broken." Miguel examined the arm carefully. It is broken. We must get you home." Getting Daniel onto Miguel's horse was a painful process, but they managed it with Virginia supporting his injured arm. She insisted on walking alongside, one hand on Daniel's knee to steady him as they made their slow way back to the ranch. Sarah was waiting anxiously on the porch and rushed to help when she saw them approaching. Between the 3 of them, they got Daniel inside and onto his bed. While Sarah cleaned his wounds, Virginia rode into town to fetch the doctor. Dr. Whitman confirmed the broken arm and 2 cracked ribs. He set the bone, wrapped the ribs tightly, and left instructions for Daniel's care. "Complete rest for at least 2 weeks," he ordered. "Then limited activity for another month. That arm needs time to heal properly." After the doctor left, Virginia sat by Daniel's bedside, helping him take the laudanum prescribed for pain. "You shouldn't have gone looking for me," he murmured, already growing drowsy from the medication. "Could have been dangerous." "I couldn't just sit and wait," Virginia admitted softly. "I was too worried about you." Daniel's eyes, heavy with approaching sleep, held hers. "Why?" Virginia swallowed, finding courage in the knowledge that he might not remember this conversation later. "Because I care about you, more than I should, perhaps." A smile touched his lips before he drifted off to sleep. "Good," he murmured. "That's real good." The next weeks were a test of Daniel's patience. Accustomed to physical labor from dawn to dusk, he chafed at being confined indoors. Virginia became his primary caretaker, as Sarah and Miguel had to handle the ranch work that couldn't wait. Virginia read to him, played checkers with him, and listened to his stories of growing up in Missouri before coming west. In turn, she shared tales of her life in Boston, the literature she loved, the students she had taught, the dreams she had harbored of adventure beyond the prim parlors of proper society. "Why did you really answer Harold Jennings' advertisement?" Daniel asked her one afternoon as they sat by the fire, Virginia mending a shirt while he whittled one-handed. Virginia paused, considering how much to reveal. "I told you about wanting a family of my own." "There's more to it than that," Daniel said gently. "I can see it in your eyes when you talk about Boston." Virginia set down her sewing. "My mother was very concerned with appearances. My shoulder," she touched the slight hunch unconsciously, "was a source of great embarrassment to her. She constantly reminded me that I would need to marry a man who could overlook my defect, as she called it." Daniel's expression darkened. "That's cruel." "She thought she was being realistic," Virginia sighed, "and perhaps she was. By the time I was 23, it was clear no offers would be forthcoming in Boston society. I threw myself into teaching, telling myself it was enough. She looked into the flames. But it wasn't. I wanted more: a husband, children, a home that was truly mine. So you came west, Daniel finished for her. Virginia nodded. Where I hoped my education and domestic skills would matter more than my appearance. Daniel reached across with his good hand and took hers. Virginia, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. There is nothing wrong with you, he said firmly. Nothing to overlook or forgive. You're beautiful, intelligent, and stronger than you know. Harold Jennings was a fool to let you go, but I'm grateful he did. Virginia's breath caught. Why? Because if he hadn't, you wouldn't be here. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. With me. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Virginia leaned forward slightly, drawn by the intensity in Daniel's blue eyes. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Then the door opened as Sarah returned from the chicken coop, and the spell was broken. As Daniel recovered, Virginia found herself thinking more about her future. She had originally planned to stay only until spring, but now the thought of leaving brought a sharp pain to her heart. She had grown to love the ranch, the rhythm of life here, the big sky and open spaces. Most of all, she had grown to love Daniel, his strength and kindness, his quiet humor, the way he saw her as whole and worthy when she had spent a lifetime feeling incomplete. By mid-December, Daniel was well enough to move around the cabin freely, though still prohibited from heavy ranch work. With Christmas approaching, the household was busy with preparations. Virginia helped Sarah make gifts: knitted scarves, carved wooden figures, cookies and candy packed in tins. For Daniel, she secretly worked on a journal bound in leather she had salvaged from an old saddle, the pages carefully stitched together. 3 days before Christmas, a heavy snowfall blanketed the ranch. Virginia stood on the porch watching the flakes swirl in the wind, marveling at the transformed landscape. She heard the door open behind her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Daniel said, coming to stand beside her. He wore a heavy coat over his healing arm, which was no longer in a sling but still tender. "It's like a different world," Virginia agreed. "So quiet and peaceful." They stood in companionable silence watching the snow. Then Daniel turned to her. "Virginia, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "Yes, spring will be here before we know it." He took her hand, his touch warm despite the cold air. "When you came here, you said it was temporary until you figured out your next steps." Virginia nodded, unable to speak past the lump forming in her throat. "Have you decided what those steps will be?" His eyes searched hers. "I've been thinking about it," she admitted. "I could teach in Silver Creek, perhaps, or go on to Denver as I originally planned." Daniel's expression fell slightly. "Is that what you want, to leave?" Virginia looked out at the snowy landscape, then back at the man beside her. "No," she whispered. "It's not what I want at all." Hope flared in Daniel's eyes. "What do you want, Virginia?" "To stay," she said simply. "With you, if you'll have me." Daniel's face broke into a smile that warmed her more than any fire could. "If I'll have you." "Virginia Williams, I've been hoping you'd stay since the day I found you sitting on that trunk at the station." He pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of his healing ribs. "I think I fell in love with you that very day, watching you hold your head high despite what that fool Jennings had done. You were so brave, so dignified." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "Then living with you these months, seeing your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. I love you, Virginia. I want you to be my wife, not because I need help on the ranch or because it's convenient, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Virginia's eyes filled with tears of joy. "I love you too, Daniel. I never expected to find love here, but somehow I found everything I never knew I was looking for." Daniel lowered his head and kissed her softly. His lips were warm against hers, gentle but assured. Virginia felt herself melting into him, all the doubts and insecurities of her past falling away in the certainty of his embrace. When they finally parted, Daniel pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't have a ring yet, but I promise—" "I don't need a ring," Virginia interrupted. "I just need you." Daniel smiled. "Nevertheless, a proper proposal deserves a ring. We'll go to town after Christmas and pick one together." He kissed her again, quickly. "For now, let's go tell Sarah. She's been pestering me for weeks to stop mooning about and ask the poor girl properly." Virginia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. She knew. Everyone knew, Daniel chuckled. "Miguel's been grinning at me like a fool every time I mention your name." Hand in hand, they went inside to share their news with Sarah, who whooped with delight and declared it would be a Christmas to remember. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the small church in Silver Creek. The townspeople, curious about the mail-order bride who had been rejected by one man only to marry another, filled the pews. Virginia wore a simple blue dress that Sarah had helped her make, with a crown of winter berries in her hair. Daniel, handsome in his best shirt and newly purchased suit jacket, couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony. As they exchanged vows, Virginia thought about the journey that had brought her here, the disappointment and humiliation that had turned to joy beyond anything she had dared to hope for. When Daniel slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. At the wedding breakfast held in the town hotel, Frank from the station approached them with a broad smile. "Well, Danny, looks like that joke you made wasn't a joke after all," he said, clasping Daniel's shoulder. "Guess you really did get yourself a wife that day at the station." Daniel pulled Virginia close to his side. "Best thing I ever did was lift that trunk," he agreed, kissing his bride's temple tenderly. Virginia leaned into his embrace, thinking how strange and wonderful life's paths could be. She had come west seeking a husband and found not just marriage, but true love and acceptance. Harold Jennings' rejection, which had seemed so devastating at the time, had led her to a happiness she hadn't believed possible. As they drove back to the ranch that evening, husband and wife under a canopy of winter stars, Virginia looked at Daniel and saw her future bright and full of promise, built on love that had come unexpectedly, but would endure through all the seasons of their lives together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin," Daniel said softly as they approached the cabin, lights glowing warmly in the windows where Sarah had prepared a special supper for their return. Virginia smiled, her heart full. "Home," she repeated, savoring the word. "That has a beautiful sound." And as Daniel lifted her from the wagon and carried her across the threshold, Virginia knew that sometimes the most unexpected journeys led to the most perfect destinations. Her mail-order bride adventure had failed, only to give her something far better, a love that had chosen her, exactly as she was.